lone thinker, lost and engaged in his own meditations.
And I mean, in many ways, the way that scholarship works in philosophy and in many of the humanities, I think, mimics some of that image. So we start off, obviously, many of you know, right, when you are submitting something to a paper journal, you're invited or it's submitted, and you're often working in isolation. The editor is in charge and in control of the invitation or of who reviews the work. Often that review, even if it is blind, is limited to a small number of people who supposedly have authority in the field. And the work is often written largely in isolation.
And then once you send that off, the clock starts ticking. And there's generally at least a 6-month turnaround, minimum of a 6-month turnaround before you get any kind of response. That response is generated through a process that involves blind review by experts in the field. Those reviewers are selected by the editors of the journal, and in many cases the sense one gets as a reviewer is provide us with a justification for not publishing this because we have so many articles that are sent to us. Unless the article is of the absolute highest quality, we don't want to publish it. The process involves a kind of anonymity, and at the end of the process, one receives either the verdict that has been accepted, that it needs to be revised and resubmitted, or that it's rejected.
And then you move on to another journal, and the process starts again. Right, and once it does get published, let's say you're lucky enough to get published, it goes into a volume. It's locked down into a book like this, and there's limited access. The good people here at the library make sure we have no copyright violations of anybody who shouldn't have their hands on this information. Okay, we love the library, so they also help with the open access stuff too. They're going to be a very important part of our online journal that we're going to propose here. There's a limited number of copies. Part of the other reason for a limited number of articles is the limited space that and prohibitive costs of printing. And then there's also limited readership, as things locked down in books like this are not often easy to get. Certainly if you're not part of an academic institution, they are even more difficult to get access to, and part of the point of a public philosophy journal and of practicing philosophy in public is to try to explode the boundary between the academy and the rest of the world.
Okay, once the article is out, one gets response and commentary in a variety of different ways. In fact, sometimes once the article is accepted, somebody else is asked to provide commentary and it will appear at the same time. In other cases, a commentary will appear in a future volume. And in some other cases, it's just left for people who are digging through the literature to respond in some other fashion. But the point is that in all of these cases, we're adding to the time between the time that the person had the original idea, drafted the original paper, and the time that other colleagues are providing substantive feedback. And we're also talking about a fairly linear and fairly static process.
So now we've been pretty heavy-handed now with our rhetorical trope here of how terrible paper scholarship is, but of course it has virtues, and we don't want to lose sight of that, right? One of the advantages of paper scholarship is that it does take time. That gives you the time for care, for careful reading, for thoughtful reflection. That is something that's important. It is, something that allows for rigorous scholarship, and we want to retain that. And there's also the question of permanence. Physical books and physical documents have a degree of permanence that often, as we learned this morning when we were looking at the obsolete technologies that we saw, don't always have. So there are virtues to paper scholarship, and the idea that we want to emphasize here is not just that traditional journals are limited and closed, although we have that now here on the slide, but that we want to try to take the virtues of the culture of paper scholarship and printed scholarship and leverage new media technologies to enhance them with the advantages and affordances of digital media technology. So that's how we're going to shift the world around here and introduce the idea of journal.
And so one of the first things that's involved in making use of these technologies involves a different kind of attitude towards publication, towards the stage in the process where publication takes part or it takes place, and the relative fixity of something once it's been published. So rather than starting with the traditional submission, invitation, and submission, the idea is that we start by recognizing that there are all sorts of different platforms out there where people are publishing interesting things. That curation, the curation of the kinds of things that are already out there is an important first step, searching, organizing, drawing people's attention to certain things that deserve further consideration. And so the idea is that we would involve a community of scholars, of faculty, of graduate students in the process of being out there looking for content that we would like to draw to people's attention.
And one of the, we've been looking around for examples. A lot of what we're talking about here are being done in different forms by different publications and different initiatives around the web. The digitalhumanities.now.org is doing something like this curation model where they're pulling in conversations and blog posts and other things that are happening around the web, and they have a team of editors who curate that, and they then have editors' choices that then go to another level of publication. So we also want to have an open peer review model in which those people engaged in the community, be they academics or professional or policymakers, are the ones actively reviewing the things that have been curated. And part of the process would then also involve review of the reviewers. So some system by which you would get credentials for being a very good reviewer. Maybe you would get some credentials by virtue of your education or the position that you hold at a policy institute or something like that. But you also would gain some credentials by being a good reviewer, by having participated multiple times and in positive ways in the community. We also envision this kind of moment in the process as an opportunity for a collaborative writing. So let's say something is pulled from the web in a sort of curated mode that comes into the review mode, and we'd like to have the opportunity for people who are interested in the topic to write together and to enhance and enrich that article before it goes to the next level.
Right. And we're not entirely creating the wheel from scratch here. That is, there are some places where this kind of thing is going on. We have a couple examples here of places that are using an open peer review model. A couple other examples of various models that one could think about for review of reviewers. And we're sort of in the early stages of looking at various models that are out there and thinking about the advantages and disadvantages of each, and trying to figure out which is going to be best suited to the particular kind of work that we want to do in the Journal of Public Philosophy. Now here we have a provocative comment from Clay Shirky. Filter then publish whatever its advantages rested on a scarcity of media that is a thing of the past. The expansion of social media means that the only working system is publish, then filter. Now, we may have some reservations about the claim about it being the only working system, but it seems pretty clear that it is emerging as a workable system and one that lends itself very well to the production of certain kinds of scholarship and the having of certain kinds of discussion. And so it seems to be a more and more viable way of thinking about the process through which we generate, vet, and respond to published works.
So here at this level, this would be kind of a level analogous to your publication has been accepted, or your submission has been accepted for publication. Here we're going to have call it something like reviewed. It's been reviewed by the community, and now it goes to this sort of level of, I think this would be something that now you could put on your CV, and it's a credential that is a peer-reviewed publication. It would remain open, though, and it would remain accessible for further and ongoing public dialogue. So we were envisioning these core articles being set up in such a way that we can have commentaries, but longer form commentaries on the articles, as well as responses, maybe even tied to single lines of the text or certain paragraphs of the text that would be available right at that level. Open again to people to review and then and comment on, And hopefully that too would generate new ideas that would then perhaps be curated on the front end and enter back into the cycle, and you would begin to have sort of ever-enriching forms of scholarship and dialogue that emerge from the process.
Now, we realize that that there are some very real limitations to the kind of project that we're thinking about. The first of which is that obviously when we're describing it in the ideal, this kind of community is great, but it's hard, it's difficult to generate this kind of community and to keep it going once it's been generated. So we recognize that is a challenge. We also recognize that there are issues about archiving, issues about the way things appear in digital publications that we'll have to address. We also recognize that there are very real challenges to doing philosophy in this public way. So the very publicness of it, which we want to celebrate as a virtue, we recognize also brings with it certain challenges. And we know that we're also embarking into relatively untested waters. As we've said, some of the aspects of this model have been implemented and tested elsewhere, but we want to bring aspects that we haven't seen. And so we know that just the very fact that the particular thing that we're suggesting hasn't been done before, as far as we know, brings with it certain very real challenges.
So yeah, this is our final slide here, kind of the vision for a journal of public philosophy that would be collaborative and open, that would perform philosophy in public as its way of publication. And I think there's a lot of exciting things about it. There's a lot of challenges. We were pretty proud of finding this little image of the people together there, and we just hope that doesn't turn into the pinwheel of death that you get if you're an ad user. But we hope that performing philosophy in this way will really be an enriching experience if we can pull something off like what we're trying to describe here. So thank you. 1 minute and 34 seconds for questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would the core articles change then, based on the discussion? Like if somebody posts something as part of the core article and then there's some commentary below where they really said, I like what you've done, but this part should be tweaked a little bit, would then the author have the opportunity to go back and revise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea, first of all, so the question is, for the people that might not have heard it online, would the core articles change based on feedback about with the ongoing dialogue? And I think, I think we would want to allow people to make changes to their document. I think, and their article. Mm-hmm. But I also think there may be a point at which there's so much to change that that sort of the process kind of has to begin again, where we turn it back into the sandbox side where we're actually collaboratively writing.
Yeah, and I would add that we, insofar as some of our
scholarly commitments may also want those changes to be traceable, so that there is still a way of seeing how it originally appeared and tracking on the basis of further revisions
So
how that's
some
changed.
distinct versions, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So in many ways, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In many ways, one of the things that I'm thinking about is a lot of these processes go on, and a lot of the myth of the lone scholar is just that. And the more we can sort of publicize the actual processes through which these things take place, then the better and richer an understanding of the community that we're engaged in can emerge.
And I think one of just the final thing that this question brings up is the kind of technical infrastructure that's going to be required to pull something like this off is pretty daunting. So, all you funders out there in the internet, we're going to be coming to you because it's got to be built and it's going to have to be dynamic in a way that's important. Mike Furlow's ready to donate. No? Question.
Why is it you think you have to build when you cited some other examples of projects that are using open narrative?
Yeah. So the question is, why do we think we have to build? You may be right. We may find that all the pieces we need. The question is, can we integrate them in ways that are that's fluid and that's sustainable? And so that's something we're going to need your help with and the library's help with. So I really do hope that you're right, Mike, that we won't have to actually build from scratch in a lot of these things, comment press and other kinds of really great things that are out there. What we're doing right now is really trying to find those things. So if people have suggestions for us, please do send them along to us. We'll try and put a blog post together that has some of the links to the things that we've already produced, and also has the slideshow here, or well, the Prezi embedded into the blog post. So, Kit has something. I don't know. Yeah.
How does the peer review work? I mean, what makes someone decide, I've got the time, I'm going to invest it in reading this and giving comment on it, as opposed to just, I'm going to skim it quickly and see if there's anything in it for me?
Yeah. So the question is, how do we cultivate a community of dedicated reviewers in the in the process, and what's in it for the reviewers? So that's a real challenge, I think, for us. I think a lot of this is going to be cashed out in terms of what is this credentialing system that we try to come up with for reviewers. So would that be something that you might put on a CV if we have enough kind of gravitas behind it, and what would that look like? I think part of what it's going to look like in practical terms is getting some big name people who are already recognized in the field to sort of throw their weight behind this and to be involved with this, just as a way of beginning. And then I do think we need a pretty formal, credentialing system where you can say, look, I'm a priority reviewer of, the Journal of Public Philosophy, and that means something. We have to come up with a vernacular for it and everything.
Yeah. I would potentially add to that one could say, well, generally or roughly the same thing that leads people to more than just skim a paper article, right? That is, it's not necessary that we're going to be building anything in that requires everybody who comes, right, to participate in this kind of way. But what we're going to do is once they get there, if they have that urge to, I found something really important to say here, they're going to be able to do that immediately and sort of in real time, rather than, okay, let me find this person's email address, let me contact them about and make some suggestions, or let me find some other way to publish a response. So it's going to be it's going to be sort of an issue of community buy-in that is going to be analogous to similar questions about how is it that people form the kinds of networks that they already form around more traditional forms of publication.
Can I just make one last comment about that? I mean, there's a lot of work that I do, and I know you do too, Kid, and a lot of us do as faculty members, reviewing stuff for journals for which we get 0 credit. We do it as professional service. I spend a lot of time sitting in my office reading articles and making thoughtful comments on them. So, I mean, it's not like people aren't doing that already. And in a sense, the opportunity that you might get some credentials and some credit, however, whatever it might count on the scale of your ultimate CV that you send in for promotion and credit for raises and things like that. Still, it's something. I mean, analogous to, I reviewed 4 journal articles this year as part of my just professional service. So there's still that. I think there's a lot of labor that faculty are doing, free labor for these paper journals. And when we do it because we're dedicated to it, it's important work. But we want to try and leverage that and have it be more open and also maybe cultivated by a rich and enriching community. So. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.